CNBC went well. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Sharp guy. He's really interested in decarbonization, which is good.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we are live. So welcome everybody who's watching on our YouTube channel. This is one more Power Lunch conversation, part of 1,000 conversations that we plan to have with the community, where we're going to be talking about the future. We're going to be talking about everything that you care about in general. And, you know, every week we have at noon this conversation. We normally invite people that have something to say. It's not about sustainability. It's not about, you know, what's great or bad. It's just about their view and their take on a number of things. Today, we're very fortunate because we have Courtney Schneider, who is a student at Cornell pursuing a Master's of Public Administration degree in Environmental Policy. She is also the associate editor for Cornell Policy Review Environmental, Climate, and Energy Policy team. And all around, I know her. She's awesome. She has, you know, this incredible view and take on our community. She hasn't been here for long, but she already formed an opinion. I'm very interested to hear that. And contrasting with that, we have Mayor Svante Myrick, who, as most people know, is probably the youngest mayor this city has ever seen, probably to this date. And also, you know, he's very interested in a lot of things. You know, like when you talk to Mayor Myrick, you realize that, you know, there is a person behind that's very interested in the future, very interested in advancing society, in advancing a number of things. So we are really, really fortunate. Thank you very much, Courtney. Thank you very much, Mayor. It's a pleasure to have you here today. So,
thank you, Luis. Thank you. Appreciate it.
This off by, you know, I'll ask the first question, then I'll move to the background, and I'll let you guys take over and have a conversation. So why don't we start with this? And it's an easy one. Like, you ran for mayor when you were really young, Svante. You went for it when you were what, 24, I think?
24, yeah.
24. Yeah. That is crazy, you know. And I don't know why you would do that, but I'm glad you did. But what if we were to talk to the 24-year-old Svante? I mean, if you were telling Courtney, you know, why you ran for mayor, what would you say, you know? And let's take it from there. Does that work?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. That was many moons ago now, so I have to remember back when I was a young man. That, I mean, some of it just has not changed. You know, I was very civically engaged already. I was on the Common Council in Ithaca for 4 years, and I just loved the city. I loved Ithaca. I loved living here, and I thought I could make a difference. I loved to serve, and I thought my service could make a difference. And especially from my background, you know, where I came from, raised the first months of my life in a homeless shelter, and for years, really my entire childhood, far below the poverty line, living through all the struggles that brings to a family, to a childhood, the stress, the strain, and this deep conviction that things did not have to be this hard. It doesn't have to be this hard on people, on families, on mothers, on children. So I always wanted to do something about it. And I came to school here, actually, Courtney, like you, I came to Cornell and intended actually to be a journalist. I wanted to write stories that would, you know, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And I wanted to be like Nicholas Kristof, but I was no Nicholas Kristof. And it turns out even Nicholas Kristof is now running for office, which is really cool, out in the Pacific Northwest. So for me then, you know, 10 years ago, issues of housing and public safety and transportation were the things I cared most about. They're what kept me up at night. Sure enough, here we are a decade later, and issues of housing, public safety, and transportation are still what keep me up at night and what keep me motivated to keep coming in for work and running for re-election, which I did. I ended up doing twice, so we could keep working on these issues. But I think that's it in a nutshell. I hope that answered the question.
Where'd you move here from?
I was actually from Earlville, New York.
Okay.
I don't know where that is. Yeah, no, I would be stunned. It's from an hour and a half northeast of here. 800 people, about 1,100 cows. So we were outnumbered. Where are you from?
I'm from Utah.
Oh, from Utah. Very nice.
Yeah, I was raised in Park City and then moved to Salt Lake City for undergrad and was there for the last 10 years and came to Ithaca in the beginning of July. So I'm very new to the area.
Yeah. So what do you think? So you've been here since July. November is about when people realize they might have made a mistake. When the weather
funny.
turns.
I was actually thinking that this morning. I'm equal parts excited and nervous for the East Coast winter. I've heard great things and horrible things about it. I don't know. I'm used to snow. I'm just not used to humidity. So
also you get a lot of sun out there.
We do.
You get more sun even in the winter than we do. This to me is the hardest part about living in Ithaca, besides making the rent, is starting like literally about today. We won't see the sun until April 15th, maybe.
Oh boy, that's weird.
It's a tough 5-6 months. Not gonna lie. But are you a winter sport person? Do you do the activities?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So I might get a skiing pass. Excited to do like cross country skiing and that sort of thing too. So I definitely like the snow.
I hear that helps. I think that will help you. I hear that helps. I'm personally not a winter sport person. I'm not much of I'm kind of an inside cat, like those when you go to somebody's house and they have cats and like, oh, you can't let that cat outside. He's an inside cat. He won't survive out there. That's me. I sit in the apartment in the winter and read books and wait until it's over.
Well, that also sounds nice though in its own way.
Yeah. It would be nice for 3 months, 6 months, not so much.
That's fair.
Yeah. So what made you choose Cornell?
Ooh, that is a good question. I applied to 5 different programs actually. And it was a tough decision I ended up having to make a tough decision. And the reason I ended up with Cornell, that I was deciding at the end between University of Michigan and I'm doing a master's of public administration here. So the main difference between the 2 programs was that Michigan
Our football team is better.
Cornell's is way better. Yeah.
Way better. Yeah. Better attended.
I went to a game. I was amazed.
Yeah.
Michigan's was a Master of Science and Cornell's a Master of Public Administration. And I just kind of did some soul searching to figure out what it is I actually wanted to do. And at the moment, I don't think I'm particularly interested in research. I think I would like to do the more public administration side. And if I had done the Master of Science, I would be more, geared toward research. So ultimately that was why I came. I had never been to Ithaca before getting here, which is kind of funny. So I deliberately didn't look at the city at all.
You didn't do a campus tour. You didn't do any of the. Yeah.
No, I didn't do. Well, because it was during COVID too.
Oh, right. It's tough in the pandemic. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Which I don't know. And I knew that I wanted to go to Cornell, so it didn't really make much of sense to me to come, tour someplace that I knew I was going to commit to anyway. But so I got here though, and I was astonished because a lot of undergrads leave during the summer, and I got here during the summer and I was like, oh my gosh, where am I? This place is so small. Because I moved from Salt Lake City isn't massive, but it's definitely bigger than Ithaca. So when I got here, it was a little bit of a culture shock, but
did you drive? Both ways can be a culture shock. I hear, for me, Ithaca was like a big city when I came here. But I hear that people who drive in, that like, especially if they're coming from New York City and they're driving around hour 3, they're like, what have I done? Where am I going? How far is this from civilization? And the same thing can happen if you fly in. You're looking around, you're like, we're landing? Where could we be landing? There's just green rolling hills everywhere.
It's the middle of nowhere. There's no service right outside town either. That definitely happened for me. I was like, did I make the right choice? Where is this place? But it's kind of nice though, because everyone here is very committed to what they're doing. I've talked to a lot of my colleagues about that actually. It's kind of nice, like during midterms just happened. And during midterms, everyone is stressed out, but there's that weird sense of camaraderie, like all around town, not just on campus, right? Like you go to the grocery store and everyone there is just stressing and commiserating.
It's true. So it's true. And of all ages too, you can almost tell you're like, that's there's the absent-minded professor standing in the dairy aisle thinking about his latest research paper with the door open, and you're like, we need to move this along. But the same in undergrads, you see them frazzled. Yeah, for sure.
So you said you studied journalism? or you wanted to, or?
Yeah, I ended up actually studying communication, which is an interesting program at Cornell, closer to sociology than to journalism.
Okay.
And I think that's actually part of why I chose this program. I had applied to similar programs all over the country. Like you, I had to make a choice between Cornell and Princeton. But I chose Cornell because I did visit here and it was just beautiful and the waterfalls were gorgeous. Also because it's close to my family here in upstate New York. And for the third reason is I did not get into Princeton. So for those three reasons, I chose to go to Cornell. And yeah, communication and sociology, it's very, it's actually a Bachelor of Sciences, which is one of the things that sets it apart is you end up doing quite a lot of research and a lot of study about how people make choices, how groups make choices, and how you can communicate risk in particular. And I think that's one of our big challenges when it comes to climate change, right? And the necessary thing, one of the early courses I took was called risk communication. And the professor, I remember she opened the class by saying, who here thinks it's easy to communicate risk? We all said, yeah, it's easy. And she said, okay, imagine I'm a smoker. What would you tell me? We all raised it and we said, well, it can give you cancer. It can make you sick. It can make you. And she said, do you imagine if I'm a smoker that I don't know these things? Right? I know all of these things. And I want you to try next time you see somebody smoking, walk up to them and say, did you know smoking could give you cancer? And if they put out their cigarette immediately and thank you, and they say, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Thank you so much for telling me that. I'll never smoke again. Then I'll give the first student who can do that $100. And I tried it actually, and it did not work. People did not high five me and say, oh, thank you for letting me know. I didn't know that. And especially when the risks seem diffuse, when they seem far in the future, and when they seem like it's possible that someone else is going to take care of it. That's when it's really, really hard to communicate adequately about the risk. And that certainly is what we're dealing with climate change. Not only do the risks seem diffuse, right? Well, something bad's going to happen somewhere, right? The polar bears, something bad's going to happen to the polar bears, but that's not me. Maybe some, the people who live in Miami, something bad's going to happen to them, but it's not necessarily going to happen to me. They seem far in the future, right? It's 2050, 2080. UN passes a resolution. 2050. I'm worried about next Thursday, right? I can't even conceive of what life is going to be like in 2050. And then, of course, someone else should do it. And I think that is actually where we're locked right now. It seems to me, I don't know if Courtney, if this is your experience too, but it seems like even on the right, we're not in the same cycle of denial and evidence that we were 10 years ago even, or even 5 years ago, where it was like, we really have to convince people that climate change is real. We have to convince people that it's caused by people, and we have to convince folks that we need big structural change. The third one is where we're running into challenges because people are saying, well, folks should change their attitude, but not the US. Really, it's China has to change first. China and Russia and Brazil show us that they can change, and then maybe we'll change. Or I support what that other city is doing, but we don't have to do it here. My neighbor should get heat pumps, but I'm not going to get heat pumps. Other people should bike, but why should there be bike lanes in my neighborhood, right? So from the cosmic scale down to the local scale, I think we are in an interesting phase where the denial is not happening, but the diffusion of responsibility is still a real problem.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I have thought about this a lot too. And I don't know what the answer is, in the way to communicate that risk, because you're right. It is really difficult for people to understand the direct risks that they face, like you were saying, we don't have polar bears here. We don't have ice caps here, or any of those sorts of things. Like, how is that going to affect Ithaca? But when you really look at the actual climatic details of climate change, it does affect us in many ways. And it's really difficult to communicate that. And, but that's another thing we've been talking about a lot in school too. I'm taking currently a disaster risk and prevention course. And we've spoken about how it is really tough to communicate hard, like scientific evidence, right? Like not a lot of people understand science.
Yeah.
And especially people who English isn't their native language. How do we communicate the massive risk to someone who doesn't understand either, the details of it? And the other thing too, to your point of deflecting the responsibility, I think I agree with you. I think that that's kind of a product of a lot of things, right? Like I think that corporations in the United States have done a lot of work to put the onus on the consumer. And consumers are not in a really great position to be able to, like, sustainability has largely become something that's only available to people who of affluence, right? Like green products and solar panels and that sort of thing, electric vehicles. And so I think
either financial affluence or I don't know what you'd call this, but people with a lot of time, of time on their hands. It's like, yes, you went down to the farmer's market and you made sure all of your vegetables were coming from. And some folks just don't have that luxury of time, even if they are middle class. They've got 3 kids, if they're trying to live their lives. But yeah, sorry, Courtney, I interrupted.
No, you're good. That's also a really good point. And to that point as well, I think that a lot of times folks that do have that time are of a wealthier position or are of an older population, right? So we're not getting fresh perspectives because those folks are trying to make ends meet, and we're not getting diverse perspectives, which is difficult. And it makes sense that people so I actually studied sociology as well.
Nice.
It's interesting. Yeah.
It is interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. To me, it makes sense that people would, I guess, struggle to make changes in their daily lives when they feel like there's so much already impacting them, because all the issues we face, like the housing issue you brought up, all these things are intersectional, and it's really difficult for the standard individual to make some sort of big change in their lives when our corporations aren't doing that, aren't making.
Oh, and they've done their work on me. I mean, I struggle with this too, and it plays on your feelings of like guilt and responsibility and what do we owe each other, and being the change you want to see. And for me, I do feel guilty about some of my individual choices, particularly around like meat consumption. So I sold my car 13 years ago, and walk, bike, take TCAP, in large part to keep my footprint low. And it is, it's mildly inconvenient. And the rent is higher because I try to live in a place where it's easier to do that. And then I do carbon offsets whenever I fly, and I feel like, I'm being a good person. But then when I sit down at the airport restaurant, I'm like, can I have a cheeseburger? And I know that I shouldn't, but I also know that, look, the entire industry, the agriculture industry that these large corporations you're talking about are the ones with the real keys to the kingdom. So how do we separate? So what would you say then from a sociological perspective? Because I've always thought, okay. So here's what I think. I think there's a few interlocking things going on here. I think that problem of diffuse responsibility that we're just discussing, and the idea that, look, anything we as an individual can do is not going to change much. We need the corporations to do something. We need these national governments to do something. I think it actually does help to start making personal lifestyle changes, because it makes you a better advocate for larger cultural changes. But I also think that Donald Trump did us a favor in this realm, that I think that there were a lot of folks, myself sort of included, that thought this is a responsibility for the federal government, more so even than local government and state governments, and that the feds have got to, not only do they have to, but they always will, right? Because I came of age, George W. Bush was president, and then Barack Obama was president. So I'm like, things get better. That's what happens with things, progress. And then all that progress got wiped out just with a couple strokes of the pen. And I think it actually woke a lot of us up and made us realize cities, we can't wait for a federal Green New Deal. We've got to start our own. So my question to you, I guess, is twofold. Is that one, do you think that there is some benefit to individual choices insofar as it makes you a better advocate for institutional corporate changes? And second, have you seen the same shift towards people taking like personalized responsibility, like shrinking their locus of control because we saw that the federal government is not going to save us?
That's a really interesting question. I absolutely do think that there is benefit to taking individual action. I don't think that people should just do nothing. I think that what I'm frustrated about is that in large part, the conversation right now is that the average consumer should be doing everything, right? I think that doing things like recycling and, not producing a lot of food waste and buying better products when you can and all those sorts of things are all really, really good. Taking public transit and all those sorts of things. I think it's incredible. And people should do that if they have the ability to do that. And to your second point, yes, I do think, and this is something that I've also thought about a lot, because I don't know if this is just a product of, when you hear something or when you're interested in something, like suddenly it's everywhere, right? I don't know if I'm noticing it more because I'm more involved in it, or if it's because it's actually happening more. Like, I feel like I'm starting those conversations a lot more, so I don't really know if the answer is yes, but that is a very good point that you're making, that there is a lot of distrust in the federal government, and maybe that is really mobilizing people to make change at a local level, which again, I think is incredibly important, because the government and corporations and all of these larger entities need to know that they have to do something, and in order for them, we have to let them know that, right? They're not going to just do it. So
yeah, I think that's so interesting, because I was guilty of it. I mean, on a lot of issues, I was like, worked really hard to get Barack Obama elected, and then I was like, oh, great, can't wait to watch him to fix everything. And then watch as like one person cannot fix everything, and then it's not just one person; it's one party cannot fix everything, one election cannot fix everything. You sort of have to work everywhere all the time to quote Littlefinger from Game of Thrones. Like, you have to be working at every angle all the time in your mind and in the streets. And I think that's certainly true on climate, but I've seen an uptick of citizen engagement and political activism since 2016 on every issue across the board. And it's not all been positive, it's not all been certainly not all been friendly. And social media has played a big role in not just coarsening the discourse, because okay, so discourse is coarse, who cares? It rhymes, but besides that, who cares that people are being mean to each other and swearing at each other? Well, let me take that back. I actually care. I think it does matter, because I think there are people with tremendous things to add, but no tolerance for being threatened, bullied, intimidated, harassed, sworn at. And they will just retreat from the public debate if that is the state of the discourse. And we will lose, to quote the Second Coming, that I think is a Yeats poem, when the worst are full of passionate intensity, right? And the best of us are silent. It's a bad place to be in, because the bullies just shout everybody else down. And it's sort of what social media is doing. But okay, setting aside the coarsening of the discourse, just the sheer amount of misinformation, it not only leads people down weird rabbit holes, right? So you got folks believing that JFK Jr. is still alive and he's going to be President Trump's running mate, and weird QAnon stuff. That's one weird subset of American culture. The other bigger problem with misinformation is when it gets too hard to tell what's real from what's fake, people just disengage, right? It's the same problem with the coarsening of the debate. When people disengage, we just lose. We lose. The answer to all of our, I believe, the answer to all of our problems, including climate problems, is engagement. More people involved will make lighter work. And I actually think it's great what you're doing, and Rebecca and Luis and Lariah, that to start the Green New Deal, to kick it off without, it's not electric charging stations, though those are coming. It's not community choice aggregation, though that's coming. It's not electrification, though that's coming. What kicked off the Green New Deal? 1,000 conversations, right? That's the first initiative of the Green New Deal. That's so important because if you get those conversations right, it makes everything else easier, way, way easier.
What does right mean though? What does it mean to get them right?
What does it mean to get them right? I think that's a good question. I think it means that there are more people interested and engaged than there were when you started. Engaged is not the right word. Committed is the right word. My mom used to say, I believe my mom used to say that. She then told me that she doesn't remember saying this, but I know it was from her, that the difference between involvement and commitment is, you can see it in a bacon and egg sandwich. In a bacon and egg sandwich, the chicken was involved, but the pig was committed. You know? And I think if we can have 1,000 conversations, where more people realize that all of our bacon, we are all committed here, right? We are all in this, and the point of the conversation has got to get people to realize that they're committed, that they have been committed by all these choices that humans have made and these institutions have made, that our governments have made. We're all in this. I think that would be what is getting it right.
How have you seen, so you've obviously been involved in this from the beginning. How have you seen it progress? Like, what are your thoughts about it, about the Green New Deal and where it started, where it's at, what you wanted to see?
Yeah, I'm really encouraged. You know, I'll confess that I was pretty discouraged at the beginning of my tenure. When I took office in the wake of the Great Recession, we had to make some really hard choices. We restructured the city government. We merged these departments. We had to streamline a lot of our operations and do all this automation to find efficiencies. We had to lay off people. It was just really a horrible time. And there was all this anger and fear about, you know, we had been going about our lives, and all the while these huge institutions, banks, were making choices that we didn't even know were undermining all of our safety and security. And at that time, I still came into office thinking that the city should be a leader on climate change. And so while we were making all these reforms and merging all these departments, I proposed that we create a sustainability department and hire a sustainability planner. And the council voted that down a couple of years in a row, I believe. And I was disheartened by that. We never fully gave up. We weaseled and whittled and negotiated, raised some private philanthropy, and then created a partnership with the town of Ithaca where they would pay for half of the amount and we'd pay for the other half. And we were able to stitch together some great work and hire Nick Goldsmith, who led some important initiatives for us over the last 5 years. But we weren't getting at that whole the big picture. We weren't putting enough resources towards the big picture of both climate change and social and class inequities, right? That we weren't making enough progress on. And I think it's really only been in the last year. And it's because we've put resources towards it. You know, finally, you know, the council realizing we've got to create and fund more positions in our sustainability department. We've got to put money in to hire contractors and consultants. And we've got to set a very clear agenda. You know, Sunrise was very useful in this and saying, this is what the clear agenda's got to be. A Green New Deal with aggressive targets and goals and a very plain spoken commitment to closing racial and social inequities has gotten us, you know, further along in the last year than in any year before it, which is good. The bad news is, you know, we're so far behind. So you're like, oh, we did a lot in this year. Really, we are where we should have been in like 1963. So how do we go even further faster is the question I'm pressing.
Yeah, that is a hard question. And I admire the position that you're in and having come from where you did and, you know, being homeless as a youth. I think that's really incredible that you saw an opportunity to make a change and you took it. And I'm curious to know, because I do think about this a lot just in my life. Like I am very passionate about the environment and about combating climate change. And it is really disheartening to see, something that you're passionate about to maybe not feel like you're in a particular position to make the widespread change, the amount of change that you want to. I'm just curious, how do you deal with that? Like when there are issues that you are really passionate about, and maybe it's really difficult to push, policy through or whatever the situation may be.
Yeah.
It's a hard question probably, but
it is
I'm curious.
It is a hard question. It is a hard question. Disappointment. I mean, I've punched my fair share of pillows. I play the drums. So there's been many a council meeting. I go home and just take it out on that poor little electric drum kit. Because my neighbors in my apartment building, right, don't want to hear my. And it's tough. I mean, there's two different kinds of setbacks. Well, there's more than two, but there's the kind where you do your best, you do everything that's in your power, and you just feel like you still didn't go far enough. And then there's another setback where you try and make your point to your colleagues, right, to the council or to the institution that you work in, and they don't go for it. And those are both equally upsetting, frustrating. I think for me, I think it's just always been easier to keep going than to stop.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the only thing more disappointing than failing, I don't know, maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, but like when I fail, I want to come back to work the next day, because that's the only way to work through these feelings. This is becoming a very therapeutic conversation, but you sort of have to exercise those feelings through your work, put it back into work and keep going and keep trying. And I just want to make a point, because your point, Courtney, is really good one. And I think it ties into the goals of the Green New Deal, which is, how do we have more people who start from where I started from, people with my background who didn't have a lot of material resources involved and engaged in this fight. And I actually, and I'm of the opinion that we in this movement have gone about it the wrong way for a long time. We're like, we have to inform the poor people about the climate changing, and then they'll care about it. And they know and they care. You have to change people's material circumstances first. You can't get them engaged and then change your material circumstances. The reason I was able to go off to college, just like my three siblings, is that our material circumstances stabilized. My grandparents were able to help take us in. My mom worked really hard, two jobs. We lived in a very supportive community that took care of us with the food pantry and food stamps and welfare when we needed it. And, I wore all my brother's hand-me-down clothes. My teachers really looked out for me. I was able to have a very stable academic setting, right? Not changing schools really from fourth grade on, was able to stay in the same school, even if we were moving around into different houses around the school district. That sort of stability is what we have to deliver to everybody in America, right? Once people have that opportunity at stability, once they can have their material needs met, they don't have to worry about how they're going to be fed, then they'll engage in this climate fight because it's an existential fight. But we can't do it the other way around. We can't go, I know you're hungry, but there's a rally at 2:00 and we're really trying to shut down this pipeline. So show up to the rally and then maybe we'll talk later about, a guaranteed income. I think we got to I think we got to reverse it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That does loop back to like what we were saying earlier about how it is difficult for people to even think about climate change and ways in which their lives can be different when there's so much going on in there. Mm-hmm. They're like living paycheck to paycheck. They are hungry or whatnot. It is, it's tough. Yeah. And I wish I knew the answer,
Yeah.
But you're right. I do think I think you're right that we have to start there and not start like we need your opinions and your engagement, but we're not gonna address the underlying issue first, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
I think, sorry to interrupt. This is just a wonderful conversation. There are some questions that, go directly to what you guys are talking about right now. Some people are asking, how can we engage in the Green New Deal if we don't have the time, if we don't have, the material luxury to actually take advantage of, so we can be part of this revolution. And other people are asking, how do we communicate the benefits? We are scaring people into being part of the Green New Deal, but can we actually invite them just because of the benefits that will come with it? And I know that you, Mayor, have been working on this, and I know that, Courtney, you engage a number of communities. So I was wondering, your take on these key points.
Yeah. Yeah, good questions, especially around participation. This is a tough nut to crack. It's something I've been thinking about for many years. Right before the pandemic, we actually started up this pilot program where we were the first in the nation to offer free childcare at city council meetings, so that anybody who, whether you're on the council or you're a member of the city staff or you're a citizen who just wants to come participate, we offer childcare in a separate part of City Hall run by our GIAC folks, which is really great. Now, of course, all the meetings have shifted to virtual, which creates its own new set of strange barriers. I think, people, I think three things. I think first, people show up to where they're invited. It's like a party. If you hold a party and you don't invite anybody, you can't get mad that nobody showed up. Second, people can't come to the party, you've got to bring the party to them. Expecting everybody to show up to City Hall is not reasonable. That's why I think this 1,000 Conversations is such a great idea, to go to where people live. And then the third one is the really big one. You have to improve people's material condition. Folks need access to good paying jobs. They need a guaranteed minimum income. They need access to food, shelter, clothing. And until they have that, we can't expect that they'll engage in this process. So we've got to be working on both tracks at the same time. We've got to be improving people's material conditions. And then the benefits of the Green New Deal, and sorry, Courtney, I'm talking a lot. So then I'll ask you these same questions. I think the benefits are exactly the right way to approach this. And when it comes to decisions made at the city level, I think that is how you sell this. Do you sell a bike lane by saying, look how much emissions we're going to reduce? No, actually, people don't. Even if they care about the issue, they want to see that it's going to be safe for their kids to bike to school. They want to see that it's going to make their street look nice and pretty. That the new sidewalk you built, the miles of new sidewalk we built in the city, I'm really proud of our new sidewalk initiative. It's created more new sidewalks in the last 5 years than in the 60-year history of the city before it combined. But we didn't do that by saying this is really going to improve our walkability score and lower our carbon emissions. So don't you want to get to the grocery store? And aren't you tired of walking in the road? And your kids have to wait for the bus over there, right? Those benefits of the Green New Deal, couched in terms of livability, and I think this was the question from, looks like from Luis, a different Luis. Lower rates of asthma, lower levelized cost of electricity, right? Those are really good selling points instead of just saying, good news, we lowered our emissions with 22%.
Yeah, definitely. The engagement piece is hard. You made a lot of really good points. And I think, I don't know the answer. And I think that if we did, right, we would be doing it, I would hope. But yeah, I mean, I think that you first need to know exactly what the barriers are within the community, but then how do you know what those barriers are without engaging the community, right? It's kind of like this weird feedback loop. And so I'm doing work with building bridges right now with Marissa Lansing, Margot Hillman, and Laura Branca. And we're sitting in on community-led conversations about the Green New Deal and about the issues within the community. And, these sorts of things do come up a lot, like a lot of things that you've already mentioned, housing and transportation and all sorts of, things that make sense that marginalized folks are feeling. And it is difficult for these people to even sometimes come to the meetings that their community members are hosting. And, there's all sorts of issues with time and childcare, and, they might have work that day, that there might be like an access issue with broadband, or, with transportation, or there's so many different facets. And I think that the question of communicating benefits and engagement kind of go hand in hand. Like I think at the root of it, I have spoken with Luis about this. I think at the root of it, something that would be beneficial is to have more of a localized resource hub, where people can go and see what exactly is happening with the Ithaca Green New Deal, and updates that are current, and see like how the community is engaging, what sorts of things are happening within the community that maybe they might be interested in, that they can kind of get involved in, pitch ideas, join the 1,000 conversations, ask questions, get involved in that way that's on their own time. And then, communicating those benefits, I think kind of loops back to the question we were asking about how you communicate risk too. Because I think it's interesting that the questions we ask typically surrounding climate change, like I think it's typically, what are you doing, and not how is this affecting you? And I think if the question is first, how does this affect you? What does it mean to you? I think it's a lot easier to then communicate the benefits, because it makes it more personalized. And climate change is a personal issue, right? It's a global issue, but it's also a very personal issue, and it varies individually. And so if we ask the right questions, then it's easier to communicate both the risks and the benefits in the same breath. I would think.
Yeah. And I think there's I totally agree. I think there's an uncomfortable conversation, but one that has to be had too, about migration. Where folks they do not connect the dots. The same folks who are like, we do not want people moving to our country, and we shouldn't do anything about climate change. Helping those people connect the dots that increase more and more places are becoming unlivable, and humans will move from unlivable places to livable places, right? I don't know. I think it's just a really hard conversation to have, and I think it's a conversation that's really relevant here in Ithaca and the Finger Lakes in Central New York, a place where I've heard it. People will say two things. They'll say, first, I don't like new buildings in Ithaca, and I don't want more people moving here, and I don't want more people living here. And in the same conversation, they'll say, we're so lucky that we live here. We have a lot of fresh water, and we're very resilient. We don't get big storms. We don't get earthquakes, etc. And you really can't have it both ways. You can't say, it's great that we live in a resilient place, and we really should put up a wall around this place because we don't want other people to move here. We don't want those people. And for Ithacans, those people are, you pick it, students, people from downstate, anybody who, didn't vote Mondale, I guess, folks that we don't want moving here. And we gotta have those conversations.
We are, reaching the end of the hour, and this has been fantastic. I really, really appreciate, both of you engaging in such conversation, and we're getting questions. And I want to leave you with, I want to ask you one final question to each one of you. And this is a question that was asked to me a few times, a few weeks ago, a part of the 1,000 Conversations. And that is, okay, let's assume that this worked out. Let's assume that, we made it. We stopped climate change on its tracks. And then, somebody's making the movie about how Courtney contributed to change everything, or how Svante managed to change things. What would you tell the person building the trailer? What would you tell? What are the key things that made the difference in your life? So let's start with you, Courtney. You are, 50 years old. You were fundamental to this massive change that was needed, and you are telling somebody this was key at some point. What would you say?
Oh my gosh, that is an incredibly hard question, but I love it. I think being here and engaging with all the people that I have here has been really incredible in my life, and the opportunities I've been given to pursue this master's program at Cornell. and the community members here that have been contributing to this effort. And Ithaca is in a very it's very interesting. So coming from Salt Lake, and again, I wasn't super engaged in the sustainability space in the way that I am in Ithaca and Salt Lake. I think that this is somewhat new to me too. I've always been interested in it, but not as engaged. And I think part of the reason for that is because Ithaca is a lot smaller, and I think Ithaca is incredible, and there are so many really amazing people here, and it's a really interesting place because there are so many activists here, and there are so many people who actually are listening to the activists and who want to make a difference. Like in Utah, the city doesn't listen to the community the way the city does in Ithaca, and at least in my experience. And I think that is key, right? Like the community and the city engagement piece is incredible. Just the breadth of ideas, the trying of new things, and the like engaging in community members and working toward everybody reaching some sort of position in their lives where they're both financially stable and they are sustainable and can have good food on the table and healthy food and all these sorts of things. I know that doesn't really answer the question that well, but I think that I don't know what the answer is. And if I did, I think I would be in a much higher position than I currently am. But yeah.
I think your answer, I think, the moment we manage to level the play field for everybody, that's when things are going to change. And that's fantastic. So now in your case, somebody's making Svante, the movie. And we're putting together the trailer on how you contributed to stop climate change at some point. What would you tell?
I would tell them to make a different movie. There's going to be a very terribly boring movie. A lot of committee meetings and paper pushing. I actually do have an idea for this. I saw there was a couple questions in the chat. Quick, I wanted to answer one on community choice aggregation. We have put money in the budget for next year. We've put $100,000 towards community choice aggregation, which is of course going to allow us to source our electricity. We're in the very early planning stages of that, so you can look forward to that. And then another question that says, institutions locally and beyond are criticized for upholding the status quo and not trustworthy to bring about the change so desperately needed. For example, what's happening right now in Europe. So how do you see the city changing this? I think part of it is acknowledging that we have not done our part. And the city is a relatively small player here in our community, which sounds like a funny thing to say. But we're like the 12th or 13th largest institution. Cornell's got something like 400 times our budget every year. Ithaca College, obviously, the hospital, the county, the school districts, all those big employers. But the city, I think we have to start by acknowledging that we have not upheld our side of the bargain. We've not invested financially as much as we should have in the past. And we've acknowledging that's the first step to turning the relationship around and building trust. Second step is actually spending the resources, finding the money and spending the money. So I think we've got to do both those things. Now, a movie trailer, I actually thought about this because I think I used to imagine when I was a young man, maybe when I was first running at 24, that I was going to be the hero of my own story. It's like Captain America. You're going to go into a committee meeting, you're going to give a speech, and the vote will shift from instead of 4-1, it'll be 5-0, and you won the vote and you saved the day. And I've realized that not only is that not how it works, but that's not actually my strength. There's very little Captain America in me. I'm an indoor cat. I don't like the who I'd like to be in a movie is Nick Fury. I'm really digging into this Avengers metaphor here, if you don't mind. But the person that assembles a team, that keeps them focused on a task, that communicates why it's important and gets them all working towards a goal, and isn't there for the big final battle, maybe even, is out of the story by then, but was one of the folks who were, had a headset on and was in the control room and helping put together the team that would save the day. That's how I think the movie should go. But again, listen, you couldn't, it's going to be a very boring movie. You'd have to add an alien invasion or something. It would not be exciting.
Well, it might be a 10-minute long movie. I don't know, but we can. but at the end, I really like what you both are saying, because, Svante, I think, changing a little bit your words, but what you're saying is, we need to build an army, and people need to be well informed, and we all need to be part of the same mission. And this is not possible unless we level the play field and everybody can participate. We're having to worry about, putting food on the table at the end of the day. So there is, I think, if anything, you guys outlined all the work that is still lies ahead of us. There's so much to do, and some people may think it's impossible, but I think you just made it very clear. It is possible. We can do this. It's just a lot of hard work. Some of it really boring. Some of it has to do with pushing papers. Some of it has to do with talking to the community. So for the very final thought, do you want to add anything so we can say goodbye to our viewers today? Svante?
Well, I'll say thank you is all I can say. Thank you for being here to participate in the conversation. Thank you to Courtney. This was a great chance to get to know you. Hope we get a chance to work together. And thank you, Luis, for moving this entire very complicated project forward. Folks might know tonight, I do think the council is very supportive. So no need to, it's not a call to action, but the Common Council tonight is going to vote on our electrification initiative, which is going to give us the chance to focus on lower moderate income households and get their buildings electrified and more efficient at no cost to them, which is really, really exciting. So I hope you'll stay tuned for all the future of these conversations. But if you're interested in how that's going to work, please do plug in with the City of Ithaca's efforts, because it's that important.
Thank you. Courtney?
Yeah, thank you guys for having me and for having this conversation, Svante. This has been really engaging and interesting. And thank you to everyone who's watching for also being engaged. Again, Ithaca is really amazing. And I think that it's incredible how many people are interested in what's going on here. And Luis, for all that you're doing, and Rebecca and Laraya and everyone that's involved. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Myrick, Courtney. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. And thank you, everybody, for engaging, for being part of this. Next week, we're going to talk about electrification. If you want to, join us once again. And, we're going to have many, many more wonderful conversations. But for now, for today, that's all, folks. Thank you very much.